I think he was just confused about what his life was heading toward because he hadn't been able to get a job. My concern is maybe he walked into the woods and never came out. Maybe somebody followed him into the woods and caused him not to come back out.
Obviously, a man in pain, desperately trying to figure out where his son, Bryan Vladek Hasel, is, but he's not the only one. This is a family that has mobilized around this. Bryan has sisters that have also been reaching out. They've been trying to raise exposure on major media. That's not going so great. So they're focusing on social media at this point. And I want to thank a couple of caring people on Twitter that got me connected with one of Bryan's sisters. We'll actually be speaking with her in the episode later today. It's time to turn on the searchlight for Bryan Vladek Hasel. Welcome back to Brainscratch Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for caring about these cases like I do. Let's go ahead and get right into the details on this one. Starting at NamUs. Thankfully, there is already a NamUs profile for Bryan Vladek Hasel here. We can see he is a white Caucasian male. Date of last contact, November 5th, 2021. Missing from Orlando, Florida at the age of 22. It's noting here his current age is 23, so that means that his family has also missed an additional birthday with him at this point. We've got the investigating agencies listed here. Of course, we're going to have the contact information that you need on the screen. We've got the direct phone number for the Orange County Sheriff's Office Missing Persons Department. Also, the agency case number. That'll be in the details down below. So if you do need to call in, probably a good thing to have that agency case number with you as well. So just hit the description box down below. The phone number's down there as well as the case number. Let's see what we can learn from the basics here at NamUs. Bryan Vladek Hasel. And if you're wondering about his middle name, Bryan is Russian. Him and his sister were adopted by a caring family here in the U.S. and brought over. He does go by Vladek from what I understand. Standing at 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighing around 220 pounds. Let's see what we have for the circumstances of disappearance. Bryan Hasel was last seen by his family at their residence in the area of Alafaya Trail and McKay Boulevard. The investigation has revealed that Bryan was last seen on November 12th, 2021 at the Place at Alafaya. That's an apartment complex. We'll look into some more of that as we go forward. He's not been seen or heard from since this time period. Bryan is known to frequent restaurants and businesses on University Boulevard and Alafaya Trail. From what I'm seeing, a very caring person, someone that looks to help others, and someone that engages people in general. So he seems to be pretty well known around this area. Hair color, they're noting brown here. Some of the photos that I'm seeing, it looks a little bit lighter, kind of a lighter brown. Like this one, you might almost say it kind of leans into blondish a little bit. I think just depending on how much sun his hair gets. But here they do have it listed as brown, blue eyes, no distinctive physical features, clothing and accessories. We don't even have a description here. We will find some as we keep going through the articles. This is a bit of a strange case in that we have a lot of sightings of him, and I don't know which ones to really lean on. The time frame of some of the information and some of the sightings, it's raising big questions for me. I'm hoping that his family might be able to help us understand that better as we roll forward. Transportation, none entered. From what I understand, there was a car. He's living with his father at this point. There's a car he had access to, but the car was in the shop. So he did not have a car during this particular time. His father's out of town during this time. And then for some reason, Vladek goes missing. Let's take a look at several. I just wanted to point out here, this photo, he was in the military. He was in the Marines for a period of time. It wasn't a great fit for him, so he did wind up being discharged. This photo I'm seeing in some places, I think might be from around his Marine career. Like, he just looks pretty muscular, pretty fit. And in other ones, the muscle tone looks different. So I don't know what's earlier or what's later, but most of the pictures I'm seeing are kind of more of this variety. Here's another shot of him. You can see it's just a different, like, there's a video clip that I saw of him on his 18th birthday. He was actually dressed up in military gear. He was extremely lean. I would say in that footage, he might have been down to 175, maybe 180 pounds. Here they're noting on these, he's approximately 220 pounds. So seems like since coming out of the military, he's probably not doing all these drills and runs and exercises. Although from what I understand, does like to play basketball, does like to go to the gym, but it's just, you can see his body type looks a little bit different in some of these. Now, this one actually gives us a description. It's saying that he went missing on the 12th of November, so bit of a date discrepancy. And here we're getting some clothing. Last seen wearing a black hoodie and shorts. So I don't know, varying information here. Let's see. On this poster, he was last seen at his apartment in Orlando, Florida on the 12th of November. So they're leaning on one of these other occurrences where he was seen rather than, his father saw him on the 5th, then his father took off. From what I understand, I believe he did talk to one of his sisters just very, very briefly on the phone on the 6th. Here in the About section, Vladek is a U.S. Marine veteran. He is a strongly spiritual person. He is caring, generous, and often helps local homeless populations. So that is about, I think, all the information we can get from the posters that we didn't see in the NamUs profile. Let's kind of take a look at this area and see if we can get a sense of it. With this story, you're going to frequently, like even in the video clip at the start, you're going to hear about the woods. And we'll talk to his family about where that information is coming from, because there's some question of him being seen walking off into the woods. The first thing I'm wondering is, so this is the apartment complex, the place at Alafaya that he lives at with his father. Of course, it's obvious, huge wooded area that's behind it. But it's not giant, and it's surrounded by a lot of other businesses. There's a courtyard by Marriott over here. This is close to a university, the University of Central Florida. And this, I think, might be maybe 1.5 miles tall by maybe 1 mile wide. And I would think just a pretty concentrated search effort. I mean, it's thick. The vegetation looks really, really thick. I get that. But it's not the biggest spot. Like if he's out here, I'm kind of surprised that he wouldn't have been found at this point, unless there's been some problem with the search efforts, or they just haven't been that in depth, something along those lines. I don't know if volunteer searches can be done here. Maybe this foliage is too thick for that. Of course, we'll be talking to the family about that stuff when we get to that part of the segment as well. So apartment here, kind of right up against where these woods are. Some of the documentation around this is saying that he was last seen at this intersection, McKay Boulevard out here and Alafaya Trail. I don't know what that sighting is in particular. Once again, there's so many different sightings that we're going to bump into as we go through these things. I'm having trouble figuring out which one's which. And like I mentioned before, which ones we can lean on. The place at Alafaya is it's just the apartment community there. So not a whole lot that we can learn from here. He was known to hang out at the basketball courts, or used to. From what I'm hearing, there is a podcast called Missing Persons done by Mike Morford. I did check out all that, and it sounds like there was a little bit of a shift. He's at some point seemed to start leaning away from some of the things that he used to really enjoy before, like playing basketball. So I don't know if it was still a current thing that he would hang out at the basketball court there at the place at Alafaya regularly. Let's get into some of these articles, starting at clickorlando.com. Bryan Vladek Hasel of Orlando was last seen by his father at their home on Alafaya Trail and McKay Boulevard, deputies said. So there's where that, kind of, sometimes law enforcement will do this. Like they don't want to give out specifics of where someone might live or something like that. We're not going to give anyone like the, apartment address, but they'll sometimes do this where they kind of simplify it to the nearest cross streets, and they'll say, okay, it's out at that particular, or this is the area where he was last seen. Really, the palace is a bit further back from that. We can see it's several blocks in terms of walking. before you get back to where the actual apartment community is. But let's continue with the kind of limited details we have here. On November 12th, Hasel was spotted walking into the woods near that same intersection. I'm just going to put it out there early now. From what I heard from his family on Morph's podcast, we're not sure that he was actually seen walking off into the woods. There was a message that was left on his father's phone. His father has some challenges hearing, and he thought that's what he heard in the message. Later, the family re-reviewed it, and they're like, no, that's not what was said in the message. So you're going to see in these news reports, they're really leaning on this. He was seen walking off into the woods. He was seen walking off into the woods. And we don't know that that's necessarily true. The other thing about walking off into the woods, something we're going to hear is he was actually seen at a coffee place that is up around this area. And I'm wondering if there is... I did see mention of some trail that's back here, but honestly, I can't see it from these satellite views. I'm wondering, especially since he doesn't have a vehicle with him at this point that he can use, would he have walked off back into the woods to get to a trail that would take him to other services? We got a Wawa up here. We got Four Rivers Smokehouse, Del Taco, Starbucks. We've got all these things up here that he might want to get to. And quite honestly, if you walk the street path that like Google would tell you to walk there, it's a bit of extra distance. Like it could throw a good, extra quarter of a mile on that walk. Where if you go direct, if there is a trail back here, like I think there is, all of a sudden that walk turns into 1 mile or less. So is there a possibility he could have been seen walking into the woods? Yes, but just know that the way that these articles are kind of spilling out that information, it's not quite as strong according to his family. Bryan is known to frequent restaurants and businesses on University Boulevard, the sheriff's office said. This is an active investigation. Continuing over at fox35orlando.com, this in February, so we can see there's an initial little push. There's a few other articles, but they don't say anything different from the one that we just looked at. Little run of kind of the press release articles around November when his family calls in the missing persons report, and then really nothing. We get to February, get another little push on the media front. Not a ton of new information in this one, but as we go forward, we will get more and more information. From February 25th, 2022, Orange County Sheriff's Office is asking the public's help in locating a man who has been missing since early November. The Sheriff's Office was able to determine that he was last seen on November 15th. So now we have the date shift again. They're saying he was seen at the place at Alafeo Apartments, but hasn't been seen or heard from since then. So we have another potential sighting from around his home. Seems to be a different sighting because we've got a different date. We've seen his father last sees him on the 5th. We have a sister that talks to him on the 6th. We have someone that seemingly sees him on the 12th. And that's potentially where the information about him walking off into the woods comes from. And now we're hearing November 15th, which his father is actually due to be home, I believe, on the 15th or the 16th. Let's continue here. Another Fox 35 Orlando article. New billboards in Orange County hope to raise awareness of missing man. This is from April 18th, 2022. You guys can see the coverage on this case, not very strong. And when I first got in touch with the family, I was pretty quick with them to ask and say, look, I'm going to need help because there's just not a lot of detail out here. And of course, they're stepping right up. They're doing anything they can to help raise exposure to this. Let's go ahead and continue. It's been 5 months since Bryan Vladek Hasel disappeared, and billboards are being posted around Orange County, hoping to reignite the search efforts to find him. Quote, unfortunately, I don't believe enough people know that my brother is missing yet, said Vladek's sister, Jody Hasel. Going 5 months with very little movement in this case has been discouraging, said his other sister, Bethany Hasel. Both sisters connected with a group of people on Twitter who are invested in just trying to help share missing persons cases. That group helped design billboards to showcase Hasel's disappearance, while Lamar Advertising reportedly donated space and time to the cause. First of all, thank you, Lamar Advertising. And I don't think this is the first time we've heard that Lamar donates space in causes like this. I think that's amazing. But did anyone else notice something missing from this? We're hearing from the sisters they've connected with a group of people on Twitter who, honestly, this article also refers to as strangers, but I cut that out. Why is this article not saying who that group is? You got a group of people that helped design the missing person billboard, helped get this going with Lamar Advertising for that artwork to be put up, and we don't thank them. That's certainly one of the things I'm going to be asking the family is, who is this group that you got connected with? Because we need people to know about them. There's other people out there that aren't getting major media coverage. They need help. I want to be able to tell them what Twitter account they should be following. And unfortunately, it's just not in this article. Vladek's case is open and active, but new details have not been released. His family said they recently learned he was potentially seen on camera at Foxtail Coffee near UCF's campus on November 6th, 2021, wearing a black hoodie, khaki shorts, and red slide sandals. So black hoodie, I think that's a match for the other clothing description that we got here. Where is it? Here we go. Black hoodie and shorts. So it might be the same. Well, I don't know if it'll be the same sighting because this one's mentioning the 12th of November. This sighting is from the 6th, but black hoodie, khaki shorts, and red slide sandals. Deputies said a red slide sandal was found in the woods near Vladek's apartment when they searched the area in November. Vladek's family wants deputies to search the woods again. I don't know why they wouldn't have, considering if they found something like that and if they're reasonably certain that it's his sandal. I'm not exactly sure. But so we're getting another potential sighting here. This one from November 6th. This is just the day after his father leaves. We know he speaks to his sister on that day. Foxtail Coffee Company is up here on, I believe it's University Boulevard. And you can see this is kind of that walking path I was telling you about. It's a 1.2 mile walk if you went and did this whole hoop around. But honestly, if there is a path back here and you can just shoot straight up to this area, yeah, I'm pretty sure that would take off about a quarter of a mile. And could that potentially explain why one of his shoes is back there? You know, did something happen? He left one behind on the way back. I don't know. Some of the kind of social information we're hearing about this is he did like hanging out in the woods. He would kind of go out there to smoke or to sing. So it wouldn't be completely unheard of that he was back there. But there's some other details about this sighting that might give us insight into something else that's going on with him at this time. Let's continue over at WESH.com. Missing Orange County man's family heartbroken without him as they continue their search. Vlad, as he is known to his family, was adopted from Russia and after high school served a short time in the military. But in more recent years, his family said Hasel struggled. Bethany Hasel said the last sighting of the 22-year-old was November 6th at Foxtail Coffee on University, where Hasel was trespassed by sheriff's deputies after some customers expressed concern over his behavior. Couple things we need to look into there, but the first one is I'm curious why Bethany would be saying that the last sighting of him was actually November 6th when we've got this information about the 12th, the 15th, but this article that we're reading right now is from April 25th. So it seems like that is a more current belief of Bethany's, that this is the last sighting of him. Maybe it's because it's been confirmed in some way. Obviously, you have sheriff's deputies interacting with him. They probably identified who he was. There might even be a police report about this. Now that gets to the next concern. What's going on here? And effectively, why would they be asking him to leave this coffee shop that he goes to? We've heard in the earlier articles he likes to hang out in places in this area. Probably wasn't his first time there. So what happened? Hasel's family says in the days that followed, a worker at Hasel's apartment complex reported seeing Hasel at the complex's basketball court. The family says Hasel was known to spend time smoking and singing in the woods behind the basketball court. The Orange County Sheriff's Office said it's done numerous searches for Hasel, including using helicopters and drones. No more information about whatever this trespassing thing at the coffee shop is in this article, but other articles give us a little more detail over at mynews13.com. The family said he changed emotionally ever since he left the military. The last time his father, Steve, said he saw Vladek was on November 5th when they were packing their things for an out-of-state trip for his sister Bethany's birthday. Vladek decided not to go. Just another thing I'm kind of curious about. I don't know if he's working at this point. I don't know why he would decide not to go, especially when it's his sister's birthday and it's kind of a family outing. But we'll see if we get some more details on that. They said Vladek had been struggling with depression since he left the military, but without warning, after returning from an out-of-state trip, the only sign of him was his cell phone inside the apartment he shared with his dad. So his dad gets back, cell phone's there, the charging cable for the cell phone's there, but the battery is dead. Looks like it really hasn't been on since November 6th. Something else that I got from the Missing Persons podcast was there was an Amazon package that his father was expecting, and his father asked Vlad, hey, be sure to bring that in when it shows up. When his father gets home, that package is still outside on the stoop. So seems like, I don't know, guys. The feeling I'm getting is the really last confirmed contact we have is on the 6th. And I'm just really questioning these things about the 12th, the 15th, especially when we're hearing things like this. His cell phone hasn't been turned on since the 6th. His father also notices when he gets home that the food that was in the fridge is pretty much the same food as when his dad left. So what was Vladek eating for 10 days? A lot of questions in my mind about this. Since Vladek's disappearance, the Hasel family has plastered flyers around the university neighborhood with the hopes that someone recognizes him. Bethany has scoured the internet on a daily basis using social media to reach as many people as possible. The sighting on November 6th, okay, so back to this story, what happened at the Foxtail coffee shop. He was cited for trespassing after a customer accused him of displaying a knife, violating the coffee shop's policy. They found the knife inside the apartment when they returned from their trip. So they mean his family found the knife inside the apartment. I don't know what type of knife this is. I mean, are we talking just like a pocket knife? Is this a Swiss Army knife? Is it something more serious? For it to violate the coffee shop's policy, for them to feel like they have to call law enforcement has to show up, basically ask him, to leave the facility. This sounds like a troubling interaction, and I want to understand it more. I don't know if his family will have more detail on that, but we'll ask about it. Bryan is one of 8 children in the Hasel household. He's the type of person who would smile at strangers on the street and help the homeless, according to those who knew him. After being honorably discharged, and this is according to newsnationnow.com, and I just wanted to point out, one of his sisters mentioned on the Missing Persons podcast, they're not 100% sure if the discharge was honorable or not. They just said that's what the way that Bryan had presented it to them. So I'm not 100% sure, but according to what we're hearing here at newsnationnow.com, after being honorably discharged, Bryan had ups and downs, his family says, struggling with bouts of depression dating back to his childhood in Moscow. As a matter of fact, it seems like part of his issue with being in the military was recalling some traumatic memories of him from his time back in Russia. I just wanted to stop for a moment and take a look at this picture, this adorable picture here with a man that helped get a few children out of that country into a loving family here in the U.S. His family believes his mental health struggles could have something to do with his disappearance, and we certainly hope that it's not the worst. Quote, I was really worried because I was thinking about his mental health, and I know my dad had mentioned some concerns that he had about his behavior and some of the stuff he was saying, Bryan's sister Jody said. He was very hyper-focused on religion, talking about archangels and demons the night before my dad left. Just makes you wonder if there's some potential that there was some type of disconnect from reality or mental break that he's dealing with around all this. Continuing at WDBO.com, a little more insight into some of these struggles. Jody said he kept asking what the purpose of life is if you can just die and go to heaven. He was very fixated on heaven and asked my dad several times, like, what happens if you end your own life? Can you still go to heaven? What if I just go into the woods and I lay down and die? This is someone that was certainly struggling. And I really hope we're not talking about the worst possible outcome here. Bethany Vladek said her brother liked nature and always spoke about living in the woods. They said there's a possibility that Vladek could be staying in the woods somewhere or living with a religious group. I want to talk to them more about this possibility. I think they actually have, believe it or not, another possible sighting where there was some information that came out that he might be considering going to live off grid. And literally, it might have been one of the last potential sightings that we have of him. So we'll certainly be asking more about that. As a matter of fact, I think it's time that we do it now. Let's go ahead and bring on some of the family and try to make some sense out of all this. Joining us on the channel right now are Bethany and Jody, Vladek's sisters. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here tonight.
Thank you for having us.
You got it. And just right off the bat, I just wanted to say I'm really sorry that you guys are dealing with this. I think you're doing a really amazing job in the social media space, getting attention on this. I saw there's been a bunch of appearances at this point. And Bethany, I got connected with you through Twitter. So it's just know that the work that you're putting in there, I think is really valuable, really helpful. And it's important that we do let people know about this story so that when there's important efforts to help this case, they know about it and they can be part of that. So if you're watching this and you're already moved to, please know we have links in the description box down below where you can follow them on numerous different social media channels. Please just sign up for those right now before we even get on into this. But okay, I just wanted to learn a little bit more about Vladek. I get, as a young man, he was adopted. He was brought into the family, brought over from Russia with his sister at the same time, right? And I understand that he loves basketball. Well, he kind of used to love basketball, right? Did it seem like he had a change? He fell out of that in some way?
Probably more recently. I'd say within the last 4 to 6 months before he disappeared, he kind of stopped playing as much or at all.
Okay.
But that he was on that basketball court all the time.
Okay. And I just wanted to touch on this a little bit because it's kind of coming up as a recurring theme that he was discharged from the Marines and then he was affected by that. But that had happened a few years prior, right?
A couple years. He was in boot camp. He graduated, served as a desk job for about 9 months with the Marines, and was discharged in about September of 2019. But it really feels like ever since, because that was a big part of his life, his whole childhood, his focus was, I'm going to be a Marine. That's what I'm going to do. So when it didn't work out for him, it really felt like he struggled after leaving the Marines of finding his ground and figuring out what next was going to be for him.
And did that struggle, like, are we talking about it was for like a year, 2 years, or was he literally struggling up just right up until his disappearance? Was it that same theme of him just feeling like he doesn't know how to fit in?
For the most part, it was, a struggle. I'd say he found more balance when he was living with my older sister, Carrie. So he really had a direction and was motivated to do well at his job that he had. But then he moved back to Florida and then kind of struggled again after that with finding what's next. And just kind of went from job to job, didn't really give anything much more of a day or two chance, and nothing really set with him. And, my dad didn't really want to push it too much because he seemed, some mental hurdles that he was going through, periods of depression. So he didn't want to push Vladek into those periods of depression any further. So dad was okay financially to support him wholeheartedly and didn't push him to pursue a job or pursue any of that because, dad was okay to financially support him.
I think I hope a lot of parents in this time period, particularly of people that age, would make that decision and kind of step up, because I can't imagine what it's like to be in your early 20s, trying to figure out your way through life, find a career path, get something going, and then having something like the pandemic hit and just bring everything to a grinding halt. Like I know the first thing we were all talking and thinking about when that hit was like, oh, the poor kids that aren't going to get to graduate and do stuff like that. But there's a ripple effect of all these important different ages. And we're now starting to understand, how that affects people. And unfortunately, yeah, Vladek he's square in that in terms of his life. So one article said that the family noticed he changed emotionally after the Marines, but then it seems like there might have been another change in early 2021. I heard a little mention of this on the Missing Persons podcast with Mike Morford. Was there anything significant going on in his life or anything that you think kind of triggered this newer change in early 2021?
Nothing that really stands out. We don't know where this change in personality originated from. My dad said Vladek started talking to him a lot about YouTube videos that he was watching, of a real focus on heaven and hell. And that's kind of when he started, really fixating on what's the point of being here when I can just be in heaven kind of thing. So he didn't really have a lot of motivation to build up a life right now. He was really just, everything of this world is a distraction. I just want to be in heaven. He started really finding ways to help the community around him, really investing his time with the homeless population. He was known to bring individuals in and sit down with them at restaurants, eat with them, cover their meal, have a conversation with them. He wanted to make sure that people felt heard, seen, and that they mattered.
You would think that would be pretty fulfilling, and especially
Absolutely.
for someone that was looking to kind of contribute to the world in some way.
Absolutely. And, that gave us, kind of hope, because he was energized by that, and he felt like, you could see that he was, really enjoying doing that, and it gave him a purpose. So my dad was able to financially, support him in that endeavor. My dad gave him the money, and Vladek went on and passed that along to those that needed it most. Like dad even mentioned a time where they had to go back to Claremont for a doctor's appointment. They were there for like 2 weeks, and Vladek got talking to the maid that cleans their room and heard that she was going through a rough time, and he left her an extravagant tip. He really tries to connect with people around him, anybody within 5 feet of him. He wants to hear your life story, and if he hears that you're struggling in any way, he finds a way to what he can do to help. That's kind of the case it was with waiters and waitresses. Dad and Vladek would go out to eat all the time, and Vladek strikes up a conversation with the waiter. And if he found out like, oh yeah, I just had, my car's in the shop right now, it's going to be, crazy money or whatever, he would leave, a $300, $500 tip to help.
Wow.
So much, in fact, that the manager of the restaurant would come back to their table, be like, hey man, are you sure this is right? And he's like, yeah, it is. And dad would be right there. He's, aware of it, and said, yeah, it was giving him a purpose. So he was just trying to support him in whatever way he could.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because just looking at the whole aspect of him trying to join the Marines, I mean, that's a very big way to give to your community also. I just wanted to check on this. The information I ran into was kind of that while he was there, it was starting to bring up some bad memories of Russia and where he had come from, and he was having trouble dealing with that, and that's why he left. Is that fair?
That's what he told us as a family. We don't know what he actually told the Marines,
Okay.
but that was the reason he gave to us of why he wanted to leave.
Okay.
But, deep down, I know he had a different picture of what his time in the Marines was going to be.
Yeah.
Growing up, always envisioned himself being, a sniper or shooter or whatever, having that type of role. So when he ended up having a role behind a desk, Vladek, he can't sit still. He's never worked a desk job in his life. It just wasn't a good fit for him. So whatever he was able to convey to the Marines, they agreed that it wasn't a good fit with them too.
Yeah.
And they went ahead and discharged him. The discharge was what they classified as failure to adapt. And Vladek said that was a honorable discharge, but we don't have a lot of knowledge of, the Marines and what their stipulations are.
Sure.
He doesn't have the benefits of a veteran discharge.
Yeah.
But it doesn't reflect negatively on him.
Sure. There's this real tough aspect to doing this kind of work where I'm speaking to families in your position like this and learning about these personalities of the missing person. Like, I wish I could be having a conversation with him right now about, hey, you know what I'm hearing, Vlad? Like, I'm hearing, like, you need to be volunteering at a soup kitchen right now. Like, his personality is just, it's coming across so clear. He wants to help people. He's engaging with people. Like counseling, he'd be perfect for counseling. Like, I could see the paths. I know that some of them take a lot of work and time and effort and energy, but we could have hooked him up. I know we could have hooked him up at a shelter somewhere, helping people and having those deep conversations that were feeding his soul like that.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I had a dream not that long ago that just felt so real. That we were looking for him. And then I found him, running his own homeless shelter.
Yeah.
And I could see that happening. I could see him succeeding at that and loving it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I'm still keeping my flame of hope alive over here that he gets to come back to this amazing family and follow those dreams. They are out there. Maybe he just needs a help kind of figuring out which ones are really standing out to him. But, okay, I want to kind of get into some of the other dynamics that I bumped into here. First of all, did he have a girlfriend?
No.
Okay. Any signs that he was in contact with any of his family from Russia, or is there any part of that could be reaching back into his life currently?
They didn't have contact with anyone in Russia. His biggest contact was Irina, our sister. She was the one that, remembers the most of their time in Russia. So she would be the one that he would call to help jog his memory on things that had happened in Russia. But yeah.
And as a matter of fact, she's the sister that he reaches out to on November 6th on a short phone call. Yep. Do we know what they talked about?
She said that she called him and said she was just checking in, see how he was doing. She said nothing was out of the ordinary. There was no red flags. It was about a 5-minute phone call. He didn't mention anything. It was just a normal everyday call.
Do we know in terms of the time frame if that was before or after whatever happened at the coffee shop?
So what happened at the coffee shop was my dad left town on Friday, November 5th, around, 6-ish. And Foxtail manager said Vladek showed up at Foxtail Friday night. And that's a place that Vladek frequents a lot. We go 3 times a week or so is what he said. And he said that there had been complaints in the past of Vladek's behavior being abnormal from other patrons. That Vladek was known to, get his coffee, and he can't sit still, right? So he would pace the coffee shop with his headphones in and be kind of singing to his music, and sometimes he would get loud. And other people would say something and be like, hey, can you get him to stop or sit down? And every time that, a Foxtail employee would say, all right, you got to go sit down now, or you're a little too loud with your singing, he would comply. So Friday, He was at Foxtail and he was either pacing or something happened where a patron made a complaint. And they told the Foxtail employee that he's making me feel uncomfortable and I'm going to leave. And he mentioned something about staring. I don't know if Vladek was staring at him or just staring off into space.
Sure.
Or what. But that's all he really said at that time. So that guy left. And then at some point, Vladek left. And that guy came back that night and said, hey, what happened to the guy that I made a complaint about? And Foxtail said, oh, he already went home or he already left. And that patron said, okay, well, I think you should know, I also saw that he had a pocket knife and he placed it on the table. So since Foxtail has a zero weapons, no weapons policy, they had to take that seriously. And Vladek had also mentioned in the past that he's a veteran and that he's sleep deprived. And there's also the history of the other odd behavior of pacing, atypical behavior for a coffee shop.
Yeah.
So they don't know anything about Vladek's mental standing or anything. So they don't know if this is a sign of, a progression in his behavior or not. So they had to take it seriously. So Vladek had already left. But they decided, the next time Vladek shows up, we'll go ahead and issue a no trespass warning at that time.
Okay.
So it's my understanding that, Vladek went to Foxtail that night. He didn't know anything was wrong when he left Foxtail that night. He wasn't told anything, or that guy left on his own.
Mm-hmm.
So he left Foxtail that night. He probably went home. He called Irina at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. early that, next morning.
Right.
Irina said nothing was out of the ordinary with that phone call. He probably didn't know anything was out of the ordinary. His phone and the pocket knife that is probably the one that he brought to Foxtail was found in the room when Dad got back from the trip. So he probably left those things in the room Saturday morning and took his, credit card to Foxtail for another cup of coffee, leaving those things behind. But when he got to Foxtail that morning, Foxtail went ahead and had the sheriff's office come out to issue the trespass warning, saying, if you were to show up on the premises again, we'll have to issue a formal trespass to never return kind of thing. So it was a warning. But it was from that day on that his phone was never used again. He had unread text messages from like 12 o'clock that Saturday on. Irina didn't hear back from him after that one call, so she blew up his phone that Saturday night. 5 phone calls on his phone trying to reach him. Multiple calls the next day. Multiple calls throughout the week trying to reach him. My dad reached out to him multiple times through text messages and phone calls to try to get a hold of him, just checking in, because he didn't know anything of what was going on.
Right.
We were up in the mountains at the time, so it's hard to say if the text messages were going through on time or not, but he sent multiple messages and he never heard anything back. There's one of the waiters he used to talk with at Smoky Bones. They had each other's phone number and they would be texting. So even that guy was reaching out to him through text message, like, hey man, just checking in. Hey, haven't heard from you. Nothing back from him. And what's odd is, like, if he had been back to that apartment and looked at his phone, he would not let Irina worry about him that much.
Yeah.
Like, he would see the missed calls and he would reach back out. And there was nothing.
Was there a report taken of the interaction with the police as they were telling him about this trespass issue?
The trespass warning page that we received from the sheriff's office only says never to return to this property again. It says trespass warning. There's no like detailed statement from the officer. It's pretty basic.
Okay.
That was it. Like it just seems pretty pretty excessive to issue something like this for someone. He had been going to Foxtail at least, the manager said like 3 times a week for like a year.
Yeah.
And the manager said no one at Foxtail witnessed the knife. So and he said the person that made the complaint wasn't a regular. He doesn't know who that guy was or anything. So to take that one complaint and escalate like that had to be crushing to him. That was his refuge. So to lose that.
Well, I think there's two things kind of at play there. And I've heard this terminology thrown around with this case a little bit. I think people were wondering if there was some mania going on or if he was entering some type of manic state. You're talking about him calling his sister. I don't know how regular it would be for him to call his sister at 1 a.m. Him telling strangers, that he's sleep deprived. Him kind of acting in that way where going to a place where, singing might not be the thing there, but he's going to sing anyway. And I think, couple that up with the fact that you have this coffee shop that is extremely close to a college campus. I mean, it's basically part of the college community there, that they're probably going to run their stuff just a little stricter than, we see the terrible things that are happening on campuses nowadays. I could see from an emotional standpoint what you're talking about. I mean, that would be heartbreaking. His universe has already shrunk so much. And now he's living in this situation where he's trying to figure out who he is, and he's trying to branch out and try these things in different places to get that sense. And then all of a sudden one of those places goes, nope, and cuts it off. Like, I mean, yes, that would be huge. Was the family getting any sense that maybe he needed some level of professional help? Was there anything going on that front? Were you guys even talking about it internally? Kind of like, hey, he might need some help here.
Yeah. I mean, my dad spoke with me a few days before he went out of town. And he was saying he was concerned about Vladek's behavior, more, I guess, his language and his speech, because he was saying that he couldn't follow what Vladek was talking about. It was all hyper-religious stuff about archangels and demons, but he couldn't really follow what exactly he was saying. So that made me concerned about him being maybe manic also. And then also it seems like there's a possibility that he might not have even slept overnight from the 5th to the 6th, because he usually sleeps at the apartment, because he usually sleeps late, and he showed up at the coffee shop like right when it opened, around 8 a.m. or so. So that was something. So I had asked my dad, could you please try to call the police and do a wellness check for him? But my dad said that he felt like Vladek would know what to say to get out of that kind of situation, and nothing would happen from that. And he's more like along the lines of not forcing Vladek into anything.
Sure.
But that really kind of puts Vladek in an unhealthy space also, because he needs to have some kind of structure the way his personality is, and he could have benefited from maybe some like medication or some counseling, for sure. Yeah,
and it's another heartbreaking aspect. Like, you guys started having the right types of conversations, but it seems like they were really just coming together like a matter of days before all of a sudden your dad was going to be out of town, and the next thing you know, we don't know where Vladek is anymore. On the other side that we were talking about earlier, I mean, man, if he would have found a good counselor, someone that he could open up to, and instead of being the shoulder that everyone else was leaning on, found that in someone else, that might have just been another big spotlight of, here's your path. Like, here's something you could be in this world as well. But your father does leave $100 in cash with Vladek, and also, is it a credit card or an ATM card?
A credit card.
A credit card. And the only usage on the credit card is at the coffee shop for the evening he was there, not the following morning. They didn't serve him that morning, right?
It sounds like it was for the cup of coffee on Friday, the the 5th.
Okay, Friday the 5th. That might explain. Yeah, that might explain. I saw 2 different dates on that. So yeah, I didn't realize it was 2 separate visits there until you shared that with us. Was there any particular reason why Vladek didn't want to go to Tennessee? It was your birthday, wasn't it?
It was my birthday. He went with us the year prior. And it's not out of the question for Vladek to just decide out of the blue, I'm just going to stay home. Because sometimes he likes to have his alone time kind of thing. So he was still kind of on the fence. I'm going to go, I'm not going to go, right up until I left on the 4th kind of thing. So, and Dad, of course, he just didn't want to push it kind of thing. So he left the credit card, $100 bill, and asked Vladek if he wanted him to get any more food for the fridge. And he said, no, there should be plenty.
Right. And then we know that that's another kind of strange indicator for your father when he gets home is the fridge is pretty much still full.
Dad said everything from what he can tell looks to be in the same place in the apartment complex. No food missing, no new dishes. Everything seemed about how he left it.
And just to be clear, I think you guys were pretty clear about this on the podcast I listened to, but we don't have any inkling that Vlad is into any type of drug use outside of, it does seem that he likes to use marijuana. I don't know if that's regularly or on occasion, but outside of that, nothing else, no other real signs that there's anything else at play, right?
Unless, because we just recently found out he frequented a smoke shop also. We got a tip from somebody who worked there. And she had said that she had seen, or they had said they had seen some kind of behavioral differences within the last few months. From, I guess, the summer to the fall or.
Okay.
She's seen some. And so I don't know, there could be a chance if he ever got into like trying K2, that like fake marijuana stuff. I know that stuff is dangerous and that can cause, psychosis also.
Okay, so your father gets home. What day does your father come home?
Monday, November 15th.
So he does actually arrive on the 15th. Vlad's phone is there. It's not charged. The cable to charge it is there. This folding knife or pocket knife. What do we know what kind of knife this is? Like, how long's the blade on this thing?
Not long. It's probably about 2.5 inches.
Okay.
Or so.
Okay. So your father finds all this stuff. The cell phone, it sounds like, was processed by law enforcement, right?
They took it into custody, evidence.
Yeah.
And then when we had the meeting with law enforcement in February, they released it back to us. And I asked them what they were able to gather from the phone. If they were able to reach out to the people that Vladek had been in contact with, the phone numbers that were in and out, calling in, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the detective told me that no, because they thought we called everybody that Vladek had been in contact with.
Oh, wow.
So going back to the knife, I will say that Vladek had just purchased that knife a few days before Dad left. And Dad asked him about it because he saw how much it was. It was like $60. He's like, why'd you need a $60 pocket knife? And Vladek told him for protection. I don't know if that's something he was just saying, because sometimes Vladek would just say things.
Yeah.
Or if he meant that it was for protection. But for it to still be in the apartment, I don't know.
Right.
Plus, there's a chance like he might have, if he had gone back to the apartment after he got that trespass warning, he could have maybe like associated the knife with negative, that negative thing that happened.
Yeah.
That's left it. Yeah, it's strange.
Your father didn't happen to ask what the threat was, why he felt like he needed to protect himself? Okay.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. So on top of the cell phone, which it sounds like really isn't leading to anything, was there a computer that he would use in the home?
On and off, but my dad said hasn't been working very well for the past year.
Okay.
And my dad said it's pretty much been sitting in his, my dad's bedroom for the past year. So he doesn't feel like Vladek has used it recently. But we are trying to see if there's any way to gather information from it, from maybe saved passwords, login information, that kind of thing. But haven't been successful thus far.
Got it. And then we get to this cluster of sightings, and I just wanted to see if I can get your help to try to understand some of this. So we know the Foxtail Coffee thing, that's confirmed because he engaged with law enforcement there. So we know he's there on the 5th. We know he went there on the morning of the 6th. Then I heard about a sighting on November 12th. Do you know which one that is?
Yes. So when we called law enforcement to issue the missing persons report, my dad went ahead and made up a missing person flyer with his personal phone number on it. And we started posting those around town, around the apartment complex. So my dad got a voicemail that night from a maintenance worker from the apartment complex and said, hey, I saw Vladek at the basketball court just last Friday, which would be November 12th at this point in time. And he said, my dad is hard of hearing, so he thought the voicemail said, after I saw him, he went into the woods. You should check the woods. But after re-listening to that voicemail a few days, so that's the initial report that was sent to law enforcement, is he walked into the woods after that.
Right.
But after re-listening to that voicemail a couple days later, he realized that the maintenance man said, you should check the woods behind the basketball court, because I know Vladek likes to hang out there to smoke or sing or whatever. Not that he actually walked into the woods.
Right.
And my dad had called him to talk to him a little bit further. And he said that he actually spoke with Vladek for a few minutes, that he and Vladek knew each other. They used to play basketball together. So I feel like it's a sighting that can be taken, a credible sighting, because he hadn't seen Vladek before, pretty much. So he knows it wouldn't be mistaken identity kind of thing.
Sure. The main thing I'm concerned about is the date of it, and actually hearing the way that you're phrasing it now, I could see where maybe a miscommunication happened, because if he said last Friday and he actually meant the Friday before, that would make it the right day.
That's what I wonder too.
Yeah.
That's what I wonder too. Because on the voicemail, he said, I saw him last Friday. So like you said, does that mean actually last Friday, the 12th, or the Friday before that?
Yeah.
5th, the day that Dad left to go out of town. So that's still not sure yet.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of those dates I would put in question, especially with, we've got all these weird conditions. Like your father had this Amazon delivery that was supposed to show up, and Vlad was supposed to bring it in. When your father comes home, it's sitting on the porch. No food eaten from the fridge. His cell phone hasn't been looked at since the 6th. Like everything's just really, for me, I'm struggling to see that on the 12th or the 15th that there was some, other valid sighting of him. But there was another sighting on the 15th. Right.
From someone in the apartment complex. They said Vladek came up to his door and told him that he was going to go off grid. Was pretty much the story.
Actually, so it was 3 a.m. when he came there. So that's another indicator of maybe mania.
Mm-hmm.
He's not sleeping. And he asked if he could stay there for a few days. And the guy said, no, I'm sorry. I have a wife and kids and there's no space. And then he said he was going to be going off the grid. He wanted to go somewhere where nobody would find him. So, and that guy, if it's the guy that the police are talking about and the guy that I spoke with, there's a guy that is a mutual friend of mine on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
We have a mutual friend. And I found out that he lived in the apartment complex and he knew Vladek because he used to play basketball with Vladek. And then at night when Vladek would be outside pacing the apartment complex, he would also be outside. And so they would talk a lot at night. So I'm not quite sure on the date, although the police are pretty set that it was the 15th. I do think that he probably went to that apartment and spoke with him. It's just a matter of when it happened, kind of thing. And he could have been staying nearby and for whatever reason decided to go back to the apartment complex those 2 days. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, thinking about this aspect of like, he's buying a knife a few days before. He's talking to people about living off the grid. He's spending all this time in the woods. Like, is there a possibility that he was doing a test run, essentially? We know that he's got issues with feeling like, electronics are too much for him at times. I guess I heard a story about him breaking an iPhone or something because he didn't want...
That's what he told Dad.
Okay.
He told Dad that, he had like a smartphone. It was actually like a Galaxy phone, not an iPhone.
Okay.
After further investigation, looking into the phone records. But he told Dad that it was a distraction.
Yeah.
And he told Dad that he broke it. I don't know if he actually did break it or if he just threw it away or if he gave it away, but Dad never saw the phone after that. And Vladek didn't want to get another phone after that, but Dad, convinced him you have to have a phone. So he convinced him to get the flip phone,
right,
which is what he currently had, kind of thing. But he was trying to be very minimalistic. All growing up, he has always, taken pride in what he had. He wants, the best. He's a guy. He wants the best name brand shoes, the best clothes. He wants to look sharp, kind of thing. The best. His phone was always his livelihood growing up, always saying, having the newest iPhone growing up kind of thing.
Right.
But in 2021, at that beginning of that year, something switched where he went to be completely minimalistic and didn't want things of this world. He kept saying things were a distraction. He gave away his tablet. He just was very little in the possessions that he wanted to keep on hand, kind of thing.
Yep.
And he had made comments about, going off grid on occasion. But Vladek also has, all growing up, he would also be known to say things to kind of stir a reaction.
Sure.
To see what people would say, kind of thing. And nothing would ever come about the majority of things Vladek would say. So it was always hard to tell what was real, what he really meant, and what he was just fantasizing about.
Was he expecting your father to come home on the 15th?
Not exactly the 15th. Dad said he would be home. Dad was expecting to get home on Tuesday the 16th.
Okay.
So when Dad got back on the 15th and Vladek wasn't there, that's why he, gave it some more time. Maybe Vladek's out with friends or something. He'll show up. And when the 16th came around, still hasn't heard from him. We made the report the next morning.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Okay. Now, other potential spottings, which I don't know about these. You guys tell me. I also saw some mention of reports that he was possibly spotted at a homeless encampment and a 7-Eleven gas station. Did any of that stuff pan out?
Nothing has panned out. None of the sightings have panned out, unfortunately. Besides, someone at a 7-Eleven, a worker, thought she might have seen someone that resembled him that she had to ask to leave. So law enforcement followed up with that. They reviewed video footage, and they didn't see anything on the video footage of anyone that resembled Vladek. There was some potential sightings in Gainesville. We have, someone from Twitter has been helping us being boots on the ground. He's been incredible, just being able to canvass the homeless population, because Vladek is very comfortable, helping the homeless population. So he's been able to speak with individuals. He even was able to cross paths with a few people that Vladek helped before he disappeared, that knew Vladek before he disappeared. One of the individuals said, I haven't seen him recently, but I'll be on the lookout. Vladek helped me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to help him now. A couple other people said, Vladek, would buy us food, get us something to eat before he before he disappeared. And, just a couple months ago, he just showed up out of the blue and bought me a meal kind of thing. So I'm leading to, believe those are real accounts because they knew Vladek before he disappeared.
Sure.
Whether it was exactly 2 months ago, it's hard to say. I can't really remember something that happened 2 months ago. It might have been 4 months or 6 months. It's been 6 months that he disappeared. So that part is still, I believe it happened. I'm just not, it's hard to say when it happened. But there was a couple accounts of, he bought me food a couple months ago. So I'm reaching out to locals in Gainesville to help me canvass around to see if anyone recognizes him, share his flyer, post his flyer around town. We're still really trying to reach out to East Orlando because that is his comfort zone.
Okay.
He is very comfortable with East Orlando. He would walk to businesses before he disappeared. He knows the streets, he knows the routes. I feel he will come back to Orlando. If he's not in Orlando currently, I feel he'll come back at some point. So just keeping his face present for people to see, to be on the lookout, because you never know where he could be right now.
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
Well, and I also want to kind of set our focus in one particular area, because I know we got thrown into this story about the woods very early on here, but there was also a search that was done back there, and they did find a red slide. Do we know that that's his?
It's not confirmed.
Okay.
The sheriff's office have done some searches at the beginning of this, and they found a red slide shoe. They showed a picture of it to my dad, back in December, end of November, saying, "Do you recognize this shoe?" And Dad said, those are the type of shoes Vladek wears. He doesn't wear flip-flops. He wears slides.
Yep.
I don't remember red ones, but I know those are the type of shoes he wears. They showed the picture to me in February at the meeting. I pretty much said the same thing. I know he wears slides. I don't remember red ones. So they said they were sending that off for DNA analysis to see if they could get anything to match it to Vladek. That wasn't productive. They couldn't match DNA to him. But then when, at that meeting in February is when we first heard about the trespass warning with Foxtail.
Right.
So we have been trying to get a hold of Foxtail to get a little bit more detail of what happened. And the Foxtail manager was able to get approval from corporate to speak with my family to shed some light into what happened. And that's when he told us about, no, he was actually at Foxtail the night before.
Right.
On Friday, that's when the incident happened. It was about a knife, and the trespass happened the next morning. The manager of Foxtail said Vladek was very calm during the whole trespass, respectful, didn't create a scene. After he was issued the warning, he simply left on foot. But, we were trying to get more information on that day, and that's when we heard about that. So once we heard about, it was a bit more than just talking too much. We were trying to, gain more information. And then corporate said that, they don't save video surveillance footage typically. Mm-hmm. It's very short-lived on their system. But since this was a trespass warning, the manager made a point to save that clip onto his personal phone in case something would come about it later on.
Wow.
So he had the coverage of the trespass warning happening. He doesn't have any coverage of Friday the 5th with what happened, but he saved the coverage from that day. So corporate said, we can't release the video to the family, but we can release it to law enforcement. But we will take a screenshot of what Vladek was wearing that day and give that to the family. So Vladek is seen wearing what I would say he wears all the time. He is typically wearing a black hoodie, khaki shorts, and slides with black socks.
Are the slides red?
The slides were red.
Wow. In
that picture, they were red. And from what I remember of the picture that law enforcement showed me back in February, they look almost identical from what I can recall. So, that really sent a lot of like alarms off in my family, seeing that picture. A lot of emotions went through, right? Because like a shoe was found in the woods.
Yeah.
The last day that we see him on camera, he's wearing the same type of shoe.
Yeah.
Right. So that was really emotional. So we really want those woods to be cleared again from a third party, just to cross our T's and dot our I's. Law enforcement is convinced, they believe it's been searched thoroughly. But we just want to be sure.
Yeah.
We don't know if the woods, we don't fully know how much of the woods have been searched, and those same woods surrounding the apartment complex connect to behind Foxtail.
Right.
They're the same woods.
Yeah.
There is even a path that you can, pretty much walk the tree line, a shortcut to get to Foxtail. It's a path he probably took since he went there so often.
I was asking.
Thing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I was looking at the map myself. Yeah, I wouldn't be walking out to the street and then kicking back.
Yeah.
I'd be just walking.
If you're going there
right
3 times a week,
yeah,
a lot on foot, you probably know shortcuts, or people around are like, hey man, I see you go to Foxtail. Have you seen this path?
Yeah.
Because that was a path that other college students have been known to take. So we really want those woods checked just to be sure. But hearing the other potential sightings recently in the homeless population, especially those individuals that have seen Vladek, know Vladek before he disappeared, say they saw him a couple months ago, that gives me a little bit of hope, thinking, okay, hopefully that's the case.
Yeah, I would just want to rule out the woods. Like I would
absolutely.
So I'm with you. Get a third party in there. Is it public land?
It's private. It's okay. Sectioned off by multiple different business or whatever.
Yeah.
So that is in the process. We do have an organization coming out to search those woods. So like you said, I just wanted to clear it out. For a while, we didn't know exactly where that red slide shoe was found. So I didn't know like if it was actually like in the wood line or whatnot. It seems like it was more on the outskirts, but even still, he was known to hang out in a tiny patch of woods behind the basketball court. So he could have hung out in other parts of the woods too, just to get away from everything.
Yeah. So this third party search is happening. You didn't do any volunteer searches, right? Back there?
The sheriff's office didn't want us to interfere in their investigation.
Sure.
It took a long time for them to agree to let us bring in an outside party to begin with. Vladek's story really took off on Twitter, and a lot of people pushed for action. And law enforcement, I feel, really started to pay attention at that point. So this other search organization, they came out within a week to meet with my family, to get a lay of the land, that kind of thing. It took them a little while to get with law enforcement to really figure things out, but they do finally have a date set. So I'm grateful for that. And law enforcement is agreeing to work with them. I'm hoping there's no setbacks.
Yeah.
Because they said they're gonna, do whatever they need. I'm hoping there's no curveballs. So my hope is that the search happens and that there's nothing that holds it back any further.
Are we looking at a window of like a month, 2 months, 3 months on that search?
Within the month and a half.
Okay.
It'll happen.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You've mentioned several different people that are helping you on Twitter, and I ran into an article earlier by Fox, and I was wondering, is Fox not giving people credit for being so amazing and like helping with the artwork and putting that together? But it sounds like you're working with some people that don't want to necessarily be credited or known, right?
A lot of people want to keep their name out of it, but it's a group effort from people on Twitter.
Okay.
It's just been really encouraging just to see people, come together around Vladek's story.
Yeah.
Vladek has always had a heart for his community and reaching out to those around him. So just seeing that kind of come back to him, and people that don't even know him trying to do what they can to spread his name and spread awareness has been really encouraging, and it gives us hope. You know, we're not trying to pull him back into a situation. We're not trying to pull him back into a home life. You know, if he is safe, if he is mentally healthy and able to provide for himself in a safe manner, that's fine.
Yeah.
But he's never done anything like this before. Nothing. So to go from, you know, he's never lived on his own before. He's never lived outside of staying with a family member. He's never had a room, you know, besides for being in the Marines, that was it. So to go from that to just nothing, we just need to know he's okay. We fear that we have to know he's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Well, we talked about some of your helpers, and although they don't want to be named, I am deeming them Team Vladek. I know.
I like that.
Yeah, and I just want to say my hat's off to you guys.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing about the amazing work you're doing. I thought the missing persons poster that was put up and then run on the Lamar ads was just so
Oh
well
my
done.
gosh.
Yeah, so my hat's off to you
Lamar's
guys.
incredible. Yes.
Yeah, thank you guys so
Thank
much
you.
for helping on
Thank
this
you.
case.
Thank you to everyone on Twitter and all the other social medias, you know, just investing your time.
Yeah.
It's an investment, and, you know, helping missing family members, we're not getting the help otherwise. You know, without you, we wouldn't have hope right now.
Yeah.
You know, so thank you for everything you guys have been doing. We really appreciate you guys.
Well, that's why it's important that you guys watching this need to follow those social links that I have in the description box down below, because right now might not be the exact time, but by following those links, all of a sudden you might see the post that's like, oh, here we go. Now we've got a fundraiser. They're raising funds for volunteer search efforts or homeless engagement or whatever the approach is at that time. You want to be part of Team Vladek as well. So please follow those socials and come along with us. Ladies, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate both of you. Anything you wanted to say before we end here?
Just really appreciate you guys taking the time and just helping spread awareness for Vladek. You know, it means a lot to my family.
Please join me in trying to help this family. Be sure to share this video with any friends, acquaintances, anyone that you know in Florida. That's where we got to really raise the exposure, raise the focus. We might need to get some volunteers out there. We might need some boots on ground. We got to be sure that this story is getting out there. As a matter of fact, one of the most recent posts on Facebook here over at the Find Vladek Facebook page, help needed in Gainesville, Florida, since there was potential sightings from the homeless community at Grace Marketplace. We're looking for local help to post Vladek's flyer and canvas businesses around that part of Gainesville. If you're willing/able to help, please email findbrianvladek@gmail.com. These are people that need help. And of course, the best way, if you're not in the immediate area that we can do that, is by trying to raise exposure and increase the chance that these people are going to join this group and help in some way. So pages you got to be concerned with, obviously the Facebook page, facebook.com/groups/Find Vladek. Also, there is an Instagram. We'll have links to this all in the description box down below. There's also a Twitter account. Anything else that comes up, I'm going to put them in the links as well. I did find a Web Sleuths thread. It's kind of, it's not super long, but it's a place for the conversation to continue. If you do want to join in on it, please check that out. And of course, I've mentioned it a couple times, but thank you to my sometimes collaborator, Mike Morford, for this podcast, Missing Persons, and this particular episode. I'll have a link to this in the description box down below as well. Really appreciate everyone spending some time here on Searchlight with this case, and I really hope that we can help this family find the truth, find where Vlad is, and hopefully bring him home. Take care, everyone. Please join us again on Monday for a brand new episode of Case Cracked, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.